you think the government should be involved in trade? Number one, it may not matter for you as an individual, but the other part is it sure matter to you if you're in the business of doing A over here and the government wants to sit down and make certain your job is protected and keep these other people in the other countries from sending their goods over here. You want to sell your goods down the street and make money, make a profit, make a living. Is there anything wrong with your government trying to protect your trade as you go through? Oh, but wait a minute. I'm a consumer. If I have you selling this over here, I want to sit down and be able to buy at the best price I can. And I hear they make a really good product, same thing as yours, but half the price over here. I want to buy these goods from another country. The government should step in and help save my money out of my wallet in the process. Just because this one guy down the street charges so much money, I can get a better deal going from another country, and actually the quality might even be better too. What is government supposed to do? A lot of times government does what the voters want them to do, but you pay attention to the aspect because sometimes you all want to sit down there and pay attention to, okay, this is a protected industry. Well, if it's for the national defense of your country, you don't want to sit down and somebody that's an enemy that your country may be into conflict with someday, all of a sudden they're making parts for all your jet fighters. Whoa, all of a sudden now your jet decides to take off under control of another country. Like, that doesn't seem to work very well. You may not be able to buy all the steel necessary if you have an issue with national defense from another country in the process. Sometimes you need to protect certain imports for your national interest, for your national defense as you go through. One of the major things that we believe in our nation is the role of federal government is to protect the borders, and the states protect the individual rights of the citizens as you go through. And then overall, the entire thing, we have the Constitution to protect all of us from everything that's around us. But protecting the borders of the United States is a major function of the federal government. It's called the national defense. And we need to do things to make certain our national defense cannot be impeded by foreign powers as we go through. And you know what? Canada has the right to feel exactly the same way, and so does Mexico, so does Japan, so does China, so does Russia, and so does France. We all have that aspect of protecting the citizens of our countries as we go through. So sometimes you can understand when they push back against trade, if they say it's restricting our ability to defend our citizens to go through. That's a pretty normal thing. Sometimes you'll even go to the point of imposing sanctions as you go through. A sanction could be, we're not going to let you take any money out of our banks because your people are involved in terrorism. And here it is. We want to punish you for letting your people and your government support the terrorists that killed so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, and becomes an enemy of our country because that country is our friend. Sometimes you want to change the behavior of people that you think are bad actors on the international stage. So you impose sanctions on them. But a lot of times they don't really achieve a goal. They just get the people more angry and want to burn more flags from the country that's picking on them. Sometimes you want to protect an infant industry and make certain it can rise and become great in the aspect of world trade as you go through. So you want to protect a newborn industry as you go through, or a dying industry as you go through. So sometimes you put barriers up, and barriers to keep other goods out of the country, to have the goods inside your country being protected. You're Japanese. You want to protect the Japanese rice farmers. Those American rice farmers, we don't want the rice. Their rice is not as good as ours. Actually, it might be just as good, but you'll never know because the Japanese, they love their Japanese rice. And you know what? They're Japanese. Do they have a right to love their Japanese farmers? Yes, they do. And by the way, we have the right to love our American farmers just as much as they love their Japanese farmers. Nothing wrong with that, except for the fact they might want to protect them with a nationalistic fervor in the aspect of trying to box out other nations. So they put a tariff or some type of barrier. Only 200,000 pounds of wheat or rice is allowed to come into our country. So they may protect the industry by curtailing trade and not allowing lower cost imports to underprice the local market as you go through. A lot of times it's protect domestic jobs as you go through. The USMCA trade agreement, which basically is the revised North American Free Trade Agreement between the US, Mexico, and Canada, one of the weirdest parts about it was the intent of our government in the United States to raise the wages of Mexican auto workers up to over $20 an hour. That there's $17.50 an hour. So that being said, what interest would it be for the U.S. to sit down there and want the Mexican government to force the automakers in Mexico to raise their wages? It wasn't nothing to do about Mexico. It was about trying to keep the U.S. people from shipping our manufacturing plants down to Mexico. If they have to pay as much money in Mexico as they pay in the United States, they won't be moving their plants. It was protecting domestic jobs and avoiding cheap foreign labor. So you start thinking about different aspects of it. A lot of times you go and you want to have these different arguments about protecting the labor that you currently have and not working on the aspect of cheap foreign labor. Sometimes the wages don't account for all production costs, but they play a significant role. And by the way, that makes for really good political rhetoric. Save the jobs for the Americans. And if you're Mexican, save the jobs for the Mexicans. Save the jobs for Canadians. Save the jobs for the Japanese. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great political rhetoric. And to be honest, it really rings deep within inside each person that's patriotic to their own country as they go through. So when you start talking about intervention in trade, a lot of emotionalism can be injected in the process as you go through. Also, it's a process of injecting fair competition. You want to sit down and look at different parts of it, say, okay, let's have really honest, fair competition. If we have goods coming into the United States that are competing against our products, do those countries have the same deep environmental regulations we have over there? Are their people protected from the chemical spills and all the different parts of pollution? If they're not, then make certain they're abiding by the same types of rules that we have here in the US in their country. And let's make certain that we have equal in the process, because they're bringing cheap goods up because they're letting the rivers become polluted with oil and different kinds of chemical contaminants. And we have to sit down and watch ours over here. Let's make certain that we have different laws or the same laws that govern both of them on different aspects of what people are being paid as you go through. What about the aspect of insurance? If we're going to require U.S. employers to have insurance for 50 or more employees, what about the ones over here? Do they have the same standards? Let's do fair competition at all levels in the process. If they don't, let's put us in trade barriers. There's a lot of different things that are involved. Sometimes governments, if they see something that's inappropriate, they'll sit down and retaliate by saying, fine, you're doing this, and we're going to put this barrier up over here. You want to dump your product as you go through? Okay, if you want to sell your product abroad for less than you're actually paying for it at home, okay, wait a minute. That's called dumping, and by our different pact, it is illegal in the process. So if you don't sell it for the same as your home market, but sell it for less, that's called dumping. Normally, it has different levels of it. Predatory dumping, trying to destroy another market, and that way when the market's gone, then you sit down and raise your prices. Social dumping, just getting it out of your country. Environmental dumping, sometimes if you go like France sits on the board of Int'lBus in the process, and all of a sudden, why would the French government want to seat on the board of an airplane company? Oh, maybe for the interest to make certain its citizens are employed. So would France be guilty of Airbus selling planes below the cost? The answer is we've had a charge there for over 10 years in the international courts. We finally just dismissed the charges, except for the fact that there's a good solid foundation for them grabbing market share to protect the workers in France from Lockheed and other companies in the United States as you go through. Sometimes you retaliate by providing financial contributions directly by the government to help the benefit for a new burgeoning industry or an existing one as you go through. Sometimes you have different import taxes you levy on certain imports that come through from other aspects of it. There's an awful lot of politics, an awful lot of posturing, and awful lot of real honest to goodness trade protectionism that seems to be solid trade-driven policies by each individual government as you go through. Here's an agricultural producer as you go through. You'll see different things that happen as you go through. In the process, one of the things that held up the USMCA trade agreement was actually Canada's dairy industry. They carry a lot of political clout in Canada, and they're worried about all of a sudden them losing economic benefits. All of a sudden, when the border opens up in Wisconsin, a giant dairy producing state in the United States, they're worried about them overwhelming the Canadian market and them losing market share. By the time it was all done, that really didn't happen, but the fear was there. So you'll see different aspects of subsidies and different political groups inside the country lobbying for their personal interest as you go through. There's a lot of different aspects of debates about sugar subsidies, about sweetening or sour food and everything else in the process. We've had sugar tariffs in place since 1789, and different kinds of quotas, different kinds of imports. Every agricultural product seems to have certain restrictions on it, either by us or by somebody else in the process. Do we have free trade? The answer is no. Do we have trade that can be moderated and talked about as you go through it? The answer is yes. Here's some of the main parts of intervention in trade and why governments do it. The national defense, that's certainly a legitimate argument you can make for any country. The national interest, trade protection protects the jobs of the citizens of the country. But by the time it's all done, does the trade protection, does it really help the overall cost of the consumer by the time it's all done? Once you get through the filtering mechanism, you end up having a winner and a loser as you go out in the process. So government intervention in trade is part of the process of international business, especially the largest ones. Take care.